She had been told to stand down, not by voice, but by omission. Her name left off the manifest, her assignment reclassified as observation only. While the others suited up and filed toward the launch deck, she remained alone in the shadow of her aircraft, helmet in hand, eyes steady. No one questioned it. No one expected her to fly. And then everything changed. A call came through the tower. A critical asset had failed mid-mission. Visibility dropped. The target window was closing. As the control room fell into silence, one line blinked back onto the ops board, a single call sign still active. From which city in the world are you watching this video today? If this story intrigues you, please consider subscribing to hear more untold stories of extraordinary service and the heroes who walk among us, never asking for the recognition they deserve. The launch deck moved like a living organism. Steam burst from catapult grates. Crew members in color-coded jerseys ran with practiced choreography. The roar of engines and the hiss of superheated cables filled the air with a pressure that clung to every surface. The sea beyond was black, the horizon invisible under moonless skies. Above, only the red lights from the tower cut through the dark. Naomi sat in the cockpit of her FA-18 Super Hornet, gloved hands resting on her thighs, helmet visor down. She wasn't on the catapult. Not yet. Her aircraft had been pulled back just before engine spool due to a fuel sensor anomaly. One blinking light on the diagnostics panel had erased her launch slot. She didn't argue. She just waited. Around her, the mission surged forward without hesitation. Jets screamed down the deck, one after another. The launch officer rotated his signal wand with rhythm, saluting each pilot before stepping clear. Catapults fired. Heat shimmered in the humid air. One by one, the FA-18s lifted into the sky, their afterburners carving light through the void. The deck crew clapped shoulders, traded nods, shouted over the wind. It was a show of force, a precise machine of retaliation in motion. Naomi remained still. Inside her cockpit, the noise felt distant, like listening through glass. Her manifest, folded neatly in her left flight pocket, remained untouched. She had already memorized her launch window. It had been hers by calculation, not favoritism. Now it belonged to no one. On the edge of the carrier, a small group of aviators watched the final launch slot fill, the last aircraft before her. One of them leaned over the railing and shouted above the engine noise, "Guess Vega's sitting this one out." Another grinned, "She'll have front row seats for the rerun." The nicknames floated just loud enough to land but not linger. Naomi didn't react. Her gloves were looped around her wrists the same way she had tied them since her first solo launch. Her fingers flexed once, testing the circulation. No tension. Just waiting. Her jet's nose art, a faded constellation of stars in the shape of Vega, had chipped along the edges from salt and wind. She had repainted it once by hand during a maintenance rotation, even though no one noticed. It wasn't about decoration. It was about alignment. The catapult reset. The launch officer gave the final salute of the cycle. The penultimate bird shot forward with a blast of steam and light, then disappeared into the sky. Below the deck, the operations crew began logging final data. Call signs updated on the board. Flight paths stabilized. Naomi's launch window was technically over. She listened to the wind rake across the canopy. Then came a voice in her headset. "Vega, you're cleared. Fuel sensor reads green. You want it." The question came flat, without tone, just operational language. She didn't answer right away. She toggled her internal systems, confirmed status. The aircraft was ready. More than ready. She keyed her mic, Vega copies, taxiing. Her voice was steady, natural, with no urgency. The carrier deck adjusted instantly. Green shirts ran to realign tow signals. Yellow jerseys waved her forward. She felt the jet roll under her control, the tension of inertia shifting into glide. The catapult track waited, reset and steaming. The light had returned. As she aligned nose to slot, the crew chief gave a sharp thumbs up. She lowered her visor fully, The sky in front of her was clean. No visual traffic. The others were already hundreds of miles out, engaged or en route. She was alone. But the vector was hers now, and she knew it better than anyone. The final checks were called in rapid sequence. Flaps, trim, power, clearance. She offered no ceremony. The deck crew saluted. The catapult fired. Naomi felt the launch hammer her spine, push her through time. In the first second of ascent, the carrier disappeared beneath her. There was no cheering, no commentary, no competition left. Just velocity. She climbed at angle, into black sky, surrounded by silence and ion wash. The instruments lit her face with green reflections. Her breathing was slow, controlled. She adjusted throttle, felt the drag release, and held the line steady. Altitude rose clean. Inside the operations room below deck, one of the junior techs looked up at the radar display and pointed. "She's up." No one answered. They had already moved on to other mission channels. Only her call sign blinked in isolation. Vega, alone and ascending. Naomi didn't glance down. She didn't check fuel. She didn't speak. Her eyes remained forward, fixed on the arc she had calculated 3 days earlier. The exact arc that would matter now. Her gloves, warm against the controls, gripped with precision. No wasted effort. No overcorrection. She wasn't chasing the mission. She was sinking to it. Above the clouds, the sky opened wider. Her display adjusted, revealing the early feed of mission traffic. The others were already engaged. Chatter filled the lower bands. Strike markers appeared and shifted. Target vectors pulsed and flared. Naomi said nothing. She adjusted course by 1/2 degree. She wasn't late. She was exactly on time. Naomi climbed higher, letting the engine settle into a steady pull as the altitude ticked upward. Her FA-18 Super Hornet hummed with quiet energy. Every panel under pressure but stable. Outside the canopy, the night had thinned slightly. The strike group had already passed this point. Their afterburners long faded into the sky. The comms were active, a constant undercurrent of clipped exchanges, course corrections, and updated target readings. She listened without interrupting. The squadron had fanned out over the valley floor. From her altitude, the terrain below showed faint lines of movement heat signatures, shadows that bled into one another, no longer sharp. The radar sweep mapped them, but not clearly. Something was wrong. A pilot's voice crackled through the channel, loud and sharp with frustration. Splash negative on primary. Shield matrix re-engaged faster than expected. Another followed. Tense. They shifted coverage. Who called that drop order? The comms lit up briefly. Not chaotic, but taut, like wire under strain. Someone asked for a visual check on grid 5. Someone else reported lock failure. A third voice called off-target vector and turned east for recovery. Fuel chatter started. Timestamps blurred. The mission was unraveling, piece by piece. Naomi said nothing. Her hands remained still on the yoke, fingers adjusting trim by millimeters. She did not dive. She did not follow. She let the aircraft level at combat ceiling and let the sky settle. Ahead, the target structure was just cresting the edge of her forward radar. Distant, partially obscured, but beginning to take shape. Below, several of the other aircraft were already peeling off. They had struck early, fast, confident, but the window they aimed for had closed before they reached it. Now they were leaving behind a mission half finished. In her side pocket, folded twice along worn creases, was a printout from 3 days ago. Naomi had stayed up late to run the pattern. It had been a quiet equation, built on repetition, power cycles, and thermal resets. She had submitted it to command with a recommendation: wait until the end of the sortie. The pattern would shift. The array would cycle. A vulnerability would appear. They hadn't listened. On her radar screen, a small pulse emerged, irregular, faint, unmistakable. The top of the target site had begun to rotate. The shield array, previously impenetrable, was changing configuration. It was rearming, repositioning, exposing a seam between its upper and lower plate. The same seam she had predicted. She angled her HUD slightly and enhanced the contrast. There it was, a clean interval, less than 8 seconds wide, forming right before her. The line flickered, then stabilized. She didn't speak. Not yet. The radio flared again. One of the junior officers asked if there were any active strikers remaining. Command replied with a clipped report: primary group returning. Fuel red on lead. Secondary bird confirming abort. Another voice, hesitant, asked a different question. Wait, who's still in airspace? The response came slower. A carrier tech checked the ops board. Her call sign blinked alone on the screen. Vega. Someone said, that's all we've got. She could imagine the pause that followed. Not long enough to stop her. Not long enough to start doubting again. Her radar screen flickered once more. She zoomed in. The seam was still there. The secondary shield had begun to lower for a configuration shift. Fuel cells exposed. Target core warming. Defensive lock offline for calibration. This was it. The window was real. No pilot had ever struck during this phase. The training data didn't even mention it. Doctrine was built around the initial breach cycle. But Naomi hadn't followed doctrine. She had watched the drills, run the telemetry, memorized the shift pattern. While others ran their mouths in the ready room, she had built the model from scratch. And now, flying alone, she was seeing it unfold exactly as calculated. Still, she didn't speak. Let them wonder. The comms grew quiet. Most birds were out of range. 2 still hovered at holding distance, confused but compliant. The target core pulsed red on her display. The array rotated once more. The timing was exact. 7.2 seconds until the plates realigned. Naomi adjusted throttle. She didn't feel adrenaline. She felt time. The kind that does not shout. The kind that knows its moment when it sees it. She angled slightly to vector east. The lights inside her cockpit adjusted as she toggled her system into strike mode. Her left hand hovered over the arming panel. No rush. The radar swept again. The seam was still open. She breathed once. Steady and deep. Then whispered a thought she didn't intend to say aloud. This is it. No one heard her. She lined up. Inside the carrier operations room, a tech stared at the strike board and said to no one in particular, she's still there. Another looked up from the feed. She's not on any return vector. Vega's not turning. Someone confirmed. Command asked the question again. Can anyone confirm why she's holding altitude? There was no answer. Naomi's radar showed the array beginning to close. 6 seconds. 5. She did not descend. She stayed level. Her vector remained precise. On the screen, the core opened fully brief, perfect, exposed. She had waited for this moment long enough. And no one else even knew it had come. Inside the cockpit, everything was quiet. The roar of wind across the fuselage had faded to a low rush, a constant pressure just outside the canopy. Naomi's breathing filled the helmet, steady and smooth, measured like each movement of her fingers on the controls. No voices filled the channel. The squadron had gone silent. Her display showed no remaining allies in range. Her call sign blinked alone on the ops feed. One green dot suspended in dark. Ahead, the target spun slowly, the radar array retracting back into protective housing. The vulnerability was already shrinking. Time had thinned to fractions. There would be no second chance. She watched the edges of the seam draw inward like the petals of a flower closing. Beneath it, the exposed fuel core glowed orange, the residual heat signature still active. Her HUD tracked the fluctuation. She adjusted the targeting pane. The auto-lock system struggled to resolve, flickering uncertainly. Naomi reached for the toggle near her left knee and clicked it down. Manual. The system dimmed for a breath, then sharpened, crosshairs realigned, auto-aid vanished. She preferred it this way. Her thumb rested near the drop trigger, not touching, just hovering. She didn't flinch. She had already made the decision before climbing aboard. The moment now wasn't defiance. It was inevitability. She exhaled slowly, just once, and said to herself, quiet and even, confirming pattern. No one else would hear it. No one needed to. The final telemetry sweep painted the exposed core in full clarity. The shield plates above it were nearly closed now, but the angle from her position 63 degrees off-center remained viable. No doctrine called for a strike from this approach. The curvature was too narrow. But her model had shown it was possible. She had trusted the model. She trusted her hands more. The radar tone pinged once, manual lock achieved. She rolled the aircraft 10 degrees right, just enough to correct for drift, and eased into a smooth descent arc. The reticle aligned with the opening. A pulse of light blinked once from the radar unit below final calibration before the housing sealed. Naomi pressed the release. The aircraft jolted with a subtle shift as the payload dropped from its bay. It spun once as it fell, stabilizers kicking in, tail rudders firing clean. Her display tracked it, a descending symbol outlined in blinking white. There was no dramatic swell, no battle cry, just a clean break from silence, a path arcing downward through dusk. Naomi kept her eyes on the display. She didn't watch the target directly. Her focus remained on the numbers, the alignment, the velocity band. She had seen this moment in simulation, not once, dozens of times, always with the same result. The payload reached minimum safe altitude. Then came the flash. It was not loud from where she sat. The pressure wave did not reach her. Only the light did. A sharp flicker across her visor that faded as quickly as it arrived. Her instruments flared briefly, then recalibrated. Target signature lost. She tilted the aircraft into a slow bank. Below, the radar site no longer broadcasted. No heat, no pulse. Only a dark patch of scorched earth. She did not smile. She did not react. In the carrier's command center, a wave of motion surged through the control deck. Screens updated. Live feed from satellite uplinks refreshed with a time delay, then lit up with confirmation markers. A junior officer at the front of the room leaned forward, blinking at the log readout. Strike confirmed, he said aloud. Target neutralized. Single payload impact. Coordinates match Zone 5. Someone in the back asked the obvious question. Who dropped? The system refreshed. One call sign appeared at the point of origin. Vega. There was a pause. The operations lead, standing at the center table, flipped open the launch manifest. Her name was still at the bottom of the sheet, next to the delayed slot marked as provisional. He didn't speak. He didn't have to. She went manual, said a voice from the side of the room. How do you know? Asked another. Autologs blank, no assist telemetry. She bypassed protocol. One of the technicians turned back to the screen. She did it alone. Inside the cockpit, Naomi reset her HUD. Her display cleared to a clean green line across the lower third. Fuel was steady. System readouts showed no faults. The override lever near her right leg was still engaged. She reached down, tapped it once, and let it stay that way. She angled north, away from the smoke line, and began her return. The channel crackled faintly. Carrier traffic, weather updates, a faint tone from an open band. No one addressed her directly. She didn't call it in. She had nothing to add. What needed to happen had happened. She flew level, horizon-centered, hands relaxed on the controls. At the edge of her display, the system marked the coordinates of her drop site with a blinking dot. It would be logged, reviewed, debated. None of that mattered now. The mission wasn't finished by chance. It was finished because someone stayed when others left, because someone watched long enough to see what was coming, because someone struck without waiting to be told. Naomi banked west, easing the aircraft into a slow arc. Her HUD returned to a quiet green, altitude holding steady, systems clean. The blast radius registered behind her as a faint glow on the map overlay, already cooling to ambient. She didn't check it twice. Her breathing remained even, hands light on the yoke, no tension left in her shoulders. There was nothing left to strike. The channel had gone still for a moment, like everyone was waiting for someone else to speak first. Then came the questions, not urgent, not panicked, just a shift in tone. "Did we get it?" asked one of the pilots in a clipped voice. He sounded like he didn't want to be the one to ask, but couldn't help it. Another voice followed, more hesitant. "Who's still in airspace?" A pause stretched across the comms, long enough to sharpen awareness. Then a quieter voice cut in, this time from the operations deck. It wasn't an officer, just a tech who happened to be staring at the screen. "Vega just cleared the blast zone," he said. "She's still live." More silence followed. On the big screen in the command room, a replay flickered into motion. Satellite delay buffered the first seconds of impact. The room fell still as the camera feed stabilized. The angle was perfect. Descent trajectory was precise. No drift. The ordnance had landed just inside the defensive gap, piercing the center of the radar node before the shield closed. One engineer whispered that it was a textbook strike. Someone else murmured, "That angle isn't even logged." The carrier commander didn't speak right away. He stared at the feed, then glanced over at the mission logs. Naomi's call sign was still active. No return signal had been issued. She hadn't declared success. She hadn't said anything at all. In the ready room below, one of the earlier flight leads leaned over a tablet and watched the footage again. He tilted the screen toward the lieutenant next to him and whispered something under his breath. "That's the window she warned about." The lieutenant nodded slowly. "They said it was too late in the cycle." "They were wrong," the flight lead said, and he didn't sound bitter, just quiet. Back in the cockpit, Naomi listened without comment. Her radar sweep was clean. The threat map was blank. She began throttling back, reducing altitude by small degrees. She was returning on instinct, not instruction. No one had cleared her strike. No one had denied it either. The comms stayed open. Her call sign remained the only active tag on the mission net. One by one, the other birds re-entered friendly airspace, but they came back empty. Inside the control room, someone finally asked the question that had been hanging in the air. Was that her? Was Vega the one who struck? A junior tech scrolled the logs and answered without looking up. She was the only one left up there. A different officer at the far terminal narrowed his eyes at the telemetry. "She flew at manual," he said. "No auto assist recorded. The vector was off profile. She bypassed all protocol locks." The ops lead, still standing with hands on the table, said nothing for a long time. Then he looked over at the radar display again. The green dot was moving, not fast, just steady, returning. On the ship deck, crews began preparing for landings. Routines resumed, lights adjusted, the catapult reset, but there was no rush. The intensity had already passed. Now the air held something else, an echo that hadn't finished rippling. Down in the data core, two simulation engineers stood watching the replay frame by frame. One pointed at the altitude curve and said, "This flight profile doesn't exist in the training models." The other replied, "It does now." In the ready room, no one spoke Naomi's name. Not yet. But the silence around her call sign had changed. It was no longer the silence of disregard. It was the silence that follows realization. Naomi adjusted her seat position and eased the throttle down another notch. The carrier was now within visual range. She could see the deck lights rising to meet her. The water below shimmered faintly with reflected glow. Her visor shielded her face, but her eyes were calm. Nothing rushed. Nothing strained. She looked down briefly at the side pocket of her suit. The folded printout was still there, exactly as she had left it. Her timing model, written in ink, marked with 3 small notches, one for each shift cycle she had tracked. She didn't pull it out. She didn't need to. Its work was already done. Behind her, the strike site cooled in silence. Nothing remained of the radar node but a burn pattern and scatter fragments. No alarms, no return fire, no secondary pulse. It had been clean. The voice from command finally returned to the channel, controlled now, even. "Vega, your window is open. You are cleared for recovery. Pad 3 is hot." Naomi acknowledged with a quiet, "Copy." She didn't say anything more. No debrief, no call-out, no summary of what she had done. The rest of the team would land first. They would be met by ground crew, by officers with clipboards, by mission debriefers ready to fill in the blanks. But there would be one detail already clear before anyone spoke. The strike had succeeded. The mission had been completed. And the final call sign that stayed in the sky long after the others had left was the one that finished it. The deck crew cleared a path, but no one called her name. Naomi touched down without ceremony, her aircraft rolling to a controlled stop as the arresting wire caught and snapped her back into stillness. The carrier's lights reflected off the fuselage, bathing it in a dull gold that quickly faded as the engines wound down. No one rushed toward her, no ladder team with applause, no clipboard-waving officers, just the routine hiss of cooling metal and the hollow echo of silence after action. She powered down the systems one by one. The switch clicks were mechanical, practiced. Her gloves were already loose. She unfastened the final strap and opened the canopy. Cool air met her face, carrying the scent of salt and distant oil. She sat for one breath longer than usual, then removed her helmet and tucked it under her arm. Her boots hit the carrier deck without urgency. She walked the line alone, visor up, flight suit unzipped at the throat. The crew stood aside. A few lowered their gaze. Others pretended to check cables or headset lines. The same ones who once joked about her timing said nothing now. No one smirked. No one scoffed. They had all heard. Inside the command room, the lights had dimmed to low operations mode. The primary screen played the strike footage again, this time with overlays and analysis windows. Naomi's trajectory filled the center of the projection, her call sign blinking through each phase of the approach. A yellow arc traced her descent vector, marked frame by frame. The timestamp froze as the payload made contact. "Impact time," a technician murmured. 06:22 and 40 seconds. The ops lead, still standing by the center console, pulled up the original mission folder. He tapped once, bringing up Naomi's rejected timing model. Her handwritten annotation glowed across the screen, circled 3 times in red. Predicted vulnerability 06:22 and 40 seconds. He didn't speak. A junior officer leaned over and whispered to no one in particular. "It's her." In the corner of the room, someone else was reviewing the launch manifest. Naomi's slot was at the bottom. Her strike logged 5 minutes after the operation had been called off. The commander finally asked the question. He wasn't angry, just quiet. "Who authorized that drop?" There was a pause. Then someone answered. She didn't wait to be. That was all. No further questions followed. Naomi moved down the stairwell toward the inner corridor, still holding her helmet tight to her ribs. The corridor lighting flickered once as she passed, then settled. She walked past the ready room without looking in. The door was half open. A few officers sat inside, staring at the mission feed in silence. One of them stood as she passed but didn't speak. She kept walking. Down the length of the hangar, the floor gleamed with oil shadows and faint echoes of rotor wash. Her steps made a soft rhythm that seemed louder than it should have. Her gloves were now unclipped and swung loosely from her belt. Her visor was up, her eyes forward. At the far end of the bay, a new crew stood assembling gear for the next rotation. One of them, a young crew chief, looked up and caught sight of her. He said nothing but didn't look away. Another crew member beside him lowered a headset without a word. A maintenance officer stepped aside as Naomi passed, giving her the right of way without making eye contact. In the data room adjacent to ops, the senior analyst tapped through the final frame again. The targeting telemetry from Naomi's strike remained flawless. No deviation, no drift, manual mode throughout. He opened a second window, comparing it to standard training models. Her path didn't match any of them. He stared at it for a long time. "Behind him," a test officer said. "We should update the doctrine archive." The analyst nodded. Already marked. She flew something no one wrote down before. They didn't need to name it. It would be known. In the ready room lounge, someone clicked the volume up slightly on the debrief screen. A mission summary scrolled across the bottom. One entry stood out. Target neutralized. 1 payload. Manual delivery. Call sign Vega. No one spoke for a while. Then one of the pilots from the first wave finally muttered. She was last off the deck. Another answered, almost to himself, and the first to strike clean. Outside, Naomi reached the end of the hangar and stopped by the wall near the maintenance lockers. She didn't sit. She didn't lean. She stood for a moment, letting the silence catch up with her. The hum of the ship beneath her boots vibrated faintly through the deck plating. The flight had been long, but she wasn't tired. She had nothing to say, nothing to defend. Everything she needed to prove had already landed with the payload. Her gloves, worn at the knuckles, now hung loose and quiet by her side. The helmet pressed against her ribs like an anchor. Her suit was streaked with dried salt, the mark of long sky hours and high-altitude silence. She reached up, brushed a faint smudge from the corner of her visor, and turned toward the rear lockers. There was no one waiting. There didn't need to be. She walked into the shadows of the hangar's rear wall, where the overhead lights no longer reached. One more step, then another, boots soft on the steel, as the ship settled into post-mission stillness. They would talk about the strike, about the timing, about the pilot who never called it in. But Naomi had never flown to be remembered. She flew because the mission asked for someone who knew when to act, not when to be seen. She launched last. Not because she hesitated, but because the moment demanded it. While others moved in formation, she moved with clarity. She saw what they missed, trusted what she knew, and acted without permission. Her strike was not loud, not celebrated, not even expected, but it was right. In the stillness that followed, her silence spoke louder than any broadcast. This is what it means to lead without being seen, to act without applause, to serve with quiet conviction. Her journey is a reminder that self-worth is not given. It is lived, that precision, discipline, and inner calm can carry weight in a world that often overlooks the quiet ones. If this story moved you, we invite you to share your thoughts in the comments. And if you believe in honoring the strength of those who never ask to be seen, follow us for more true stories of quiet power and extraordinary service.